Okay, so this is week 5, day 3, and we are going to introduce y'all to databases today. Past week or so, we've been doing some object-oriented programming. We've been working with classes. You've been doing your algorithms, but all that data that we're producing with those, we're kind of just leaving it behind. We have nowhere we're storing that information. No way to grab it in the future if we wanted to revisit it. So that is why we're going to be looking at databases now. Has anybody heard of a CSV file? I'm sure some of you have. Yes, and work with it probably in your job currently. Can anybody tell me what a CSV file is?
The file separated by commas.
Yes, exactly. It's a comma separated file. You can pull up CSVs in Excel and it'll kind of put it into this kind of format for you. But it will look like this, where it has a row of headers, and then the subsequent rows are each of the items within this file. And they'll line up underneath the rows. It can get sort of hard to read if you're just looking at it initially here in the file, but based on where that comma is how it separates between the header, the key basically, and the value that is associated with it. So we can see here, the database is just a system of storing and organizing information. I already kind of covered this briefly, that we're going to query databases using SQL, to be covered next week, which is a lie, and I'm going to fix that. We will cover SQL in the future, but for now, we are going to be just reading and writing to a CSV file to kind of simulate storing the data and information, and then bringing it back up again for future use. And you'll actually see a lot of, my work is inundated with CSV files, mostly because the application, our main application, reads and writes CSV files, and it's too hard to convert that to more modern database structures. So chances of you actually working with CSVs is pretty high. So we're going to kind of step through this lecture together. If you want to pull up VS Code, there's going to be no good way of splitting my screen here, probably. Actually, can I? Sometimes Windows works for me, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. So let's say we have not people. We are going to make a file that's called nflteams.csv. Teams.csv. Okay, this is going to be our database where we're storing all of our information. I'm just copying this to make it easier, but here we have the ID, and the ID is a unique, in this case, it's going to be a unique identifier for each of these entries, and that's what you'll see also with SQL and relational databases, and other databases as well, is that each will have a unique key associated with it. And here we're naming it ID. So one will never be used again. Like, you won't see me doing this with a new person. I can't do that. We've already used one. So we're going to simulate our SQL database in that way. We have an ID, 1, 2, and 3. And then we have our team. We have Patriots, Bears, and Jets. We have wins and losses. Again, each of these are separated by commas. That's how it knows how to associate with what key up here. Okay, so we're going to use, Python has a built-in CSV library. You can parse CSV files in many different ways. Python's made it easy. You can check out, there's a link here to look at the documentation to figure out what's going on, but basically you can copy what we're going to show you in the lecture today and use this and manipulate the data as you will after pulling it from the file. So we'll go back to our Python file. Again, with a lot of the things we do here, we're going to have to import this module, this CSV module. That will let us be able to use this library built into Python. So this is the structure. I'm just going to copy and paste, and I recommend you do the same thing as well. Basically, we're going to open this file with open. That's telling, that's Python saying we're going to open the file we pass in here as CSV file. This is giving it a name that we can refer to later. Okay, so the next line here, CSV reader equals CSV.reader. This is telling it now, after we've opened this file, we want to read this file that we've opened. So we take this name we gave it when we opened it, and we want to read it here. So we CSV.reader with the name. Now we've opened it, we're reading all the values in this file. So now we can work our way through it. It's going to start at the top. And we're telling it for each row in this CSV reader, as we're reading through it, I just want to print the row. Okay, so it's going to go row by row. Should get an output like this, because it will output a list, comma separated, or it will output a list here. So let's just run this and see if that works. Did I save it? I saved it, didn't I? Why is it not printing? Anybody see NFL teams.csv? Maybe I need to save this file. That might be it. Yep, that was it. I didn't save the CSV file. Okay, so here we can see it went through each row and printed out a list of all the items that were separated by commas within, let's see, within this file. So this is good. We're getting the data out, we're reading it, we can do things with this. But how might this pose a problem to us if we're looking at this data and we want to work with it?
I see just 4 arrays. So it'd be, is there an easier way to work with the indices? Like, I don't know, I feel like it'd be better if it was like a dictionary and each one had like an ID or something.
Yep, exactly. So we could grab things within this. We could rewrite our code and we can say, you know, for, let's say I just wanted, I wanted the names of all the teams within this file. So we could go ahead and read each row and, you know, we looked at the file. We know the team is the second one here in our list. So it's going to be at an index of 1. So we can say maybe print row index of 1. And so that will give us, you know, the header and all the teams. But yes, it's kind of still difficult to work with this information because we'd have to do a lot of going through and assigning the rows maybe to variables. We want to skip the first row maybe because it just has the header names, you know. So yes, next step, it would be easier if we could read it in a dictionary. So then we can just pull keys instead of reading through each row and assigning these to a specific indice. So there's a thing for that as well. Instead of just reader, we will now use a dict reader. We'll go back to this. And now what do we expect to see with this? Well, it's right here, so it's not a surprise. We are getting dictionaries printed out, and we can see each of these headers now that were in this file are keys with a value associated with it. So much easier to work with now. We have a whole, we've printed it out. So all these different elements within this are in dictionaries. Okay, so I don't have ordered dict though. I wonder if that's an older Python version. Is anybody else running this as we're going through it?
Yeah, I don't have it either.
Yeah. This might be an older version of Python did it like that. But it should, as we see here, it keeps the order. So this was just saying that they returned it in an ordered dictionary because they wanted to, dictionaries don't have an order, but with a CSV file, we'd like to go ahead and keep track of the order it was in that file. So it will return it like that. That looks nothing like what I'm getting. Let's see. For each row in that front row. I guess instead of just, yeah, it's just doing this behind the scenes and returning that dictionary. Ordered as in ID will be first, then team, then wins, then losses. That's how it's doing it. Any questions on that? Or kind of following now how that works with the dictionary output? Okay, so now we're going to kind of get into different things we can do with the CSV class. So to unlock additional features, we can add modes. These are different modes you can use when opening the file, and you'll always use it with this within this open statement to identify what you're going to be doing, what mode you want to open it in. So if we don't, we can specify, you can read through this at your leisure, but we have a read only, a read write at the beginning of the file, a write only, you know. An important thing to note is the write only. So what does this mean? Truncates the existing file to 0 length. If I were to open this with the mode of write, let's see, everybody's name to call on somebody. What do we think will happen when I call this with the mode equals write?
You can only write to the file, you can't read. So if it truncates file to 0 length, there's going to be, it's just, right, like you can just add to it.
Okay, so let's add, we've opened as write. And then we can just, instead of doing a reader, we're going to do a writer. That didn't work. And we will see what happens then here. So we can't read it. NFL teams. Oh. This has to be the same because this is the name we've given the CSV file we're opening. Okay, so instead of reader, we're going to do writer because we want to put information into our file. We want to add Giants and Lions into our teams. So we're opening it as write. We said, okay, here's the file. We're going to do a writer through it. And we're going to write row and add these 2 rows. Easy enough. Okay, so we're going to call that. Let's look at our file. Oh no, like the README says, we overwrote the pre-existing entries. So what this write only truncates existing file. Truncate means to, like, you know, cut off. So it's going to remove everything so that the file length is 0 and then write your entries you've told it to write. So basically when you do a write, it's going to overwrite everything with what you've identified here in your write row. To not do that, I wonder if I can just get back. I don't want to do that, so we're going to write it as append. So it's a write, and we're going to append it onto the end of the file if the file exists. Okay, so here they've changed that there as well. Let me clear this. So now we call it, now we're crossing our fingers. We hope we just see everything in addition to Giants and Lions, and it didn't work. Probably because I didn't save that file. Overwrite it. Okay. Now maybe. Oh, so what happened there? Does anybody know what happened? It's weird. It wrote it up here. Let's go back and look at what we had beforehand. Okay, so this was the first file before we called our writer. And then, no, I don't know the redo. And then it just stuck that right there. So an important thing to note is you always need one space at the end of the CSV file for it to have a place to write. Otherwise, it's going to write in the last spot that it left off. So basically it threw this up here and appended it on the end of the file, technically, because this was the end of the file, but it does not automatically start in a new row.
So what do you have to do to fix it?
We just make sure we have a blank row right here. So now if we call that, it writes it appropriately. Okay.
Can we write in a blank row somehow?
You can, yeah, you can pass in like a break in there, I'm pretty sure. But common practice is to leave just one extra empty line. But that's something you can play around with. Okay, so I told you this was going to be a super short lecture. And that is all that. Oh, okay. No, they do also have. This is what you said. You can do a new line. And it's a good habit to empty line. Look, I knew that without even reading the lecture. It says that all right here, but so we can write like we did here in a list, but we can also write, it looks like, using a dictionary instead of the array list. It's list in Python, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. So let's go ahead and pop this in there and see what happens when we do, okay, so we have append, we have, we're gonna, okay. So let's come over here. And we called this NFL file. Okay, so can we see what we're doing here with the to use the dict writer? What does it look like we have to do first? Hamilton, if you're there. No. All right, how about let's move on to Danielle. What's different about using a dict writer instead of just using writer? If we
You have to specify the field names before.
So we can do it before, which is cleaner and easier, or we can also pass it in here, but it's better to just assign it to a variable and then reference it here. So here we have, and you have to have it in the order you want it to, or actually, I don't know. I'd have to double check, but I'm assuming based on how this is set up, you need to keep the order that it will go into the CSV file. But I could be lying to you. We can look into that. So here we'll do, instead of writer, we do a dict writer, just like reader, dict reader. And we will put it in our NFL file with the field names equaling these field names. And here we write row, make sure you structure it in a dictionary where you have each key value pair separated by commas. And let's save that. We're going to delete this, make sure we leave at least one line at the end there. And then we'll go back and see it wrote in there as well. Okay, so do we want to take this a step further and kind of look at how we can manipulate the data after we read it, or do y'all want to kind of play around with that on your own? Because I'm open to either. It would just be a basic, like. No preferences? Okay, well, since this was so short, let's go into one more example then. CSV. Okay. Save this example on the other side here because I don't want to create a file in class. Okay, so this, let's get a few more people in here. We're gonna have David is 47 and also lives in Chicago. Let's do Evelyn. That's my middle daughter's name. She's 80 and she lives in, okay, that should be good. Okay, so here we just have a basic database, call it if you want to, of people, ages, and cities. So we remember how to, well, let's minimize this so you can't look. Come back here. Okay, so how, if I want to just read this file first, do you remember how I set that up? Or no? I just copied and pasted. You can look back at the README. What is the first thing we have to do when grabbing the file? There's two important steps in this.
We gotta open it.
Yes, we're gonna open first. So it's a with open. I believe, let's see, I'll have to look back at the, okay. Yep, just with open. So we're gonna with open. And right now we just want to read it. So with open, as you see here, if I stop, I can read on the screen here that we can pass in the file descriptor or path, the file we want to open, we can pass in a mode. There's a bunch of other things we can pass in as well, but we don't need to worry about that. Look at in your own free time if you want to. So we want to pass in our file, which is people.csv. And we are going to actually specify read mode for this. Now, I can't stop here because I want to write to it. And right now I have no way to refer to this open
You have
file.
to give it a variable, right?
Yep, so we're going to
As
give it
people.
a variable. You could also call it like an alias. So when we get into SQL databases, you'll refer to some of them as, you'll say as, and then give it a name that you can refer to later on instead of the actual database name. Save some time. So we're gonna read this as just fine. Keep it simple. Okay, so now that we've opened it, next step that we want to do, Allison, what's the next step? After we open,
We need to read the file.
okay, we need to read it. So again, we're going to give it a variable just so it's easier to parse through the data. And do we want to open this? How do we want to read it? Do we want to do just reader or dict reader? Doesn't matter. We just want to look at the information. So
I think that
The dict reader.
you want to do dict reader? Okay, let's do that. So before I can use dict reader, I gotta call the library that we're going to be. So actually, look, we can look at this library. Here is the CSV library. And so if with all the class object-oriented programming you've been learning and all that, if you scroll through the library, you should find a method called dict reader. So this is the method that dict reader is actually calling. So if you want to look into that and see how it's initialized and all that, feel free to. But before we can use dict reader, we have to access that library. Okay, dict reader. And here we pass in an F iterable string, field names. Okay, we're just going to pass in the file name, which was file. Okay, so now that we've opened it and we've got it ready to read, if we just want to print it out on the screen, how do we read through it now? Daryl.
Use a for loop.
So for, what do I want to,
For text.
you said text?
Yeah, text in reader.
Okay. So this will go, so text will go, it's going to read row by row. So to be more explicit, we could say row. But if you just remember that text will be reading this file row by row. So we'll go ahead. So for text in reader, we're just going to print it. Print text. All right, here we go. We have all of our people. So now we're reading it. But I don't want to just read it. I want to look through this file and count how many people over the age of 30 that live in Chicago. So we are going to write that now. So I want a count of people over greater than 30 and live in Chicago. Okay, so I'll leave that up there, but we're going to work with it down here. Okay, so we've opened it. We can read through it. We know how to kind of loop through every row and just see the information. But now we're going to want to do something with it. We want to just tally up a count. So if I want to tally up a count, what should I do first?
Make a count variable outside the for loop.
Yeah, we will do that. So we'll just throw up like people over. I'm trying to get better about my variable names because I'm teaching y'all bad habits by just saying count. So people over 30 count. Oh my gosh, if I can type. And we're going to start it at 0, of course, because we haven't done anything with it yet. So now when we go through each row, I don't want to print it. I want to tally up the people over 30. So how can I do this?
Do an if reader age in square brackets. Greater than 30.
Okay.
And then colon. Count, next line count plus equals 1. No, not count. People would have done count.
Yeah.
Count. Plus equals 1.
Okay.
Is text a dict object?
Yeah, I was gonna say
So
reader's the whole thing.
yeah, so wouldn't it be text up instead of reader?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
Text stage. Okay. So is this gonna, let's see what it, and then at the end, we want to just return people over 30. Actually, let's do a return f string. Meh. There are What did I do wrong?
If you're gonna do that, don't you need an and statement if text and city? Right? Because if text age is greater than 30 and city, if you're doing it for the people in Chicago, because you got different cities.
Yes, exactly. I was gonna run it and we're gonna see. So right now we have if the person's over 30, which hits that first one. But we want also the people that live in Chicago. So I don't know why. What's wrong with my within a
The
function?
indentation.
Yeah. No. Or text.
Is is the with statement a function to return something? We're just reading it. And then it's not a function though, right? To return.
Maybe change it to print.
Maybe just, yeah. Just printing it. We'll just do that.
Well, there was nothing to return, like he was saying,
Right.
didn't make a function.
Good catch. Yep, this is not a function. So we can only use it with a function. Okay, so let's do, so we did over 30 and we said, what is it? City? What do we have? City equals Chicago. Okay. So we think that looks good. All right. Oh, what do we got going on here? Let's read our error.
Yeah, all the numbers are strings. So you gotta turn the text age into a integer.
Exactly. Okay, that's not right. Is that right? Did I save this? Over the age of 30. Okay, we're reading over the age of 30 count for text and reader if that is greater than 30 and the city. Did I spell it wrong? No. People over 30. Oh,
Do you have a space next to 47 in the CSV file?
do what?
Look at the CSV file for a second. Is there like a space it's accounting for next to 47? So it's not actually, it's like 47 in the string that is turning into an integer.
Yeah, that's it, probably. Because those count as characters. Okay, so we have 2 people, is that right? That doesn't seem. Yes, that's right. I was looking at Evelyn. She's in New York, but yes, Chicago. We have Charlie and Devin over the age of 30. They're both over 30. So, all right. Any questions on? So now we can, so it wasn't a function, but we can stick it in a function if we wanted to. Okay. And you can pass in information or not. You don't have to put it, and then we can indent all of this. And then we can return the F string too. So you can put this with open and the reader and all that and writing within a function to meet your needs. For good measure, just because I'm not sure about scoping, I'm going to put this outside of this with open. I don't think it matters. And then we can just. I don't want to capitalize print function. There. So it returns the 2 for us. Okay. Good. Any questions?
Hi, Tiffany, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, the file in this case, like the people.csv, right, is very small and you can copy and paste. But I'm thinking like if the file is very big, like a few thousand of lines of data inside the file. So how do we just like import the file to this? We just did a code and then there's the code to read the file. How do we do it?
I'm not sure I'm understanding. So you're asking like if we have another like a really large CSV file or information?
Yeah, yeah. Because when the file is too big, right, you cannot just copy and paste.
I mean, well, it depends. You can do a control A to select everything and
Okay.
paste it. For our purposes, I don't think you'll get a file for these exercises that's too big to be just thrown in here. But you can also download a file into your directory if you
Okay. Yeah.
find one that's large.
For that writing piece, that reading piece, you could put a path as well, right? Instead of the actual file name.
Yeah, it looked like it. I had never, let's see.
At least that's what the instruction says.
Dict writer.
If you just put a path there, I don't think it's going to know what to
That's the right.
use. And so normally what would happen is you would put the path and the file name.
That would be a good thing to look into. It might be within the documentation. Well, it should be. If it's not, that's not very good documentation. But so we can look in the. Oh gosh. Okay. So we're looking at like reader and writer. CSV file. This would be something you should. Let's see if there's a path. Nothing that says path. I would have to look into that more because I did see that pop up when we were looking at the method. It looked like it said you could put in a file path, but it might have just meant the file. Let's see. Dict reader. Oh, so we never passed in the field names. F is file, I guess. I'm gonna stop recording while we look into this because nobody needs to watch us look through this. So once.